Thank you and good afternoon. Good afternoon. All right, thank you. Well, it's a great pleasure for me to welcome all of you, being a board member, and of course, welcome to my home, your home, at National Academies. So this is really an amazing event. I've been attending this for many years, and it's so great that we are able to host this in the National Academies. Last year we did this, and I think it was really successful, and I guess you're ready to come back here again. So I think this, to me, highlights so many people who have accomplished so much and are so central to biomedical research. And I thank all of them and awardees. But I want to thank Mary Woolley and welcome her because she's the CEO of Research America. Without her, we're not where we should be, or we can't be where we are in terms of research, advocacy, research funding. So it's a great pleasure for me to introduce, she doesn't need an introduction, to welcome Mary, who will preside over this event. Mary.
Thank you so much, Victor. This is a special place, the National Academies, and I think it's fitting that Research America's awards event is held here. Actually, it started here. I believe that was 28 years ago, thereabouts. And our very first, and actually I think the first 10 awards events were held here. Then we moved on to other spaces and other places, but it's great to be home. So thank you. We are grateful for all of you, to whom I extend a special welcome, including our members, and of course, our sponsors and benefactors. You've been hearing in the slides presentation, and you'll hear more about all of them as we go forward today. Your help and your involvement personally makes all the difference. It makes it possible for us to be our best selves as advocates and to inspire more people to do the same. And numbers count in this town as in other places. The more people who are speaking up, who are delivering high-impact messages about the importance of research for health and for science broadly stated, the more likely we are that the Congress and the administration will respond. Whatever Congress it is, whatever administration it is, over the years, that's been our role, and we're committed to continuing it. So we want to thank you all, and I hope to have the opportunity to thank you in person. But at this point, it's my pleasure to turn the podium over to Research America board member and Amgen Chief Technology Officer, Dr. David Reese, who's representing our lead sponsor today, Amgen. Thank you, Dave, and over to you.
Well, thank you, Mary, the Research America Board of Directors and staff. I'm so pleased to be representing Amgen this evening. Amgen, like this year's Advocacy Award honorees, is committed to using our scientific expertise to strive for solutions that fight the world's toughest diseases and dramatically improve people's lives. I think we could say that of everyone in this auditorium this afternoon. It's now my great honor to introduce you to the 2024 Advocacy Award honorees. First, the Honorable Michael N. Castle, Chair Emeritus, Governor of Delaware, and United States Representative, receiving the John Edward Porter Legacy Award, generously supported by Ann Lurie. Dr. Rita Colwell, Distinguished University Professor, University of Maryland, College Park, receiving the Builders of Science Award. Dr. Robert W. Kahn, Distinguished Policy Fellow, School of Global Policy and Strategy, UC San Diego, and CEO Emeritus, the Kavli Foundation, receiving the Gordon and Laura Gund Leadership Award. Norm Augustine, retired Chairman and CEO, Lockheed Martin Corporation, former Acting Secretary of the Army, receiving the Herbert Pardee Family Award for National Leadership and Advocacy Research. As you heard, Dr. Abraham C. Verghese, the Linda R. Meyer and Joan F. Lane Provostial Professor and Vice Chair for the Theory and Practice of Medicine, that's a mouthful, at Stanford University, receiving the Isidore Rosenfeld Award for Impact on Public Opinion. Now, of course, most of you know Dr. Verghese is a best-selling author. I've been a huge admirer of his work, dating back to his groundbreaking memoir, My Own Country, many years ago, and more recent novels such as Cutting for Stone and The Covenant of Water. If you have not read the latter, which is relatively recent, I'd urge you to get a copy. Dr. Verghese is actually on a book tour and unable to join us tonight, sends his regrets, but his great appreciation for this honor. The Alzheimer's Association, receiving the Paul G. Rogers Distinguished Organization Advocacy Award. Dr. Rajiv J. Shah, President, the Rockefeller Foundation, receiving the Outstanding Achievement in Public Health Award, generously supported by Johnson & Johnson. Also part of the Outstanding Achievement in Public Health Awards, generously supported by Johnson & Johnson, Dr. Jason McClellan, Professor and Robert A. Welch Chair in Chemistry, Department of Molecular Biosciences, UT Austin, will receive the Building the Foundation Award. Dr. Celine Gounder, Senior Fellow and Editor-at-Large for Public Health, KAF Health News, receiving the Meeting the Moment for Public Health Award. And finally, Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, receiving the Rapid Translation Award. Please join me in applauding all of our honorees.
Over the years, I've sat in literally hundreds of offices of senators and congressmen. Scientists need to encourage others to speak on the behalf of science. Individual scientists, while what they say is important, don't have the impact that large groups that include both scientists and people who are not scientists and speak on the importance of investing in research. That's where the big impact, I think, is. And that's what Research America is about, why it's so important.
It's now become very clear that we need to have an understanding as scientists of how the results of our work impact on society and interact with the lay public. So I think understanding the need for this, being able to translate the science into a common understanding is really critical. I consider Research America one of the very important organizations for science and human health in the United States and globally.
I'm hopeful that we can continue to find ways, regardless of political disagreements, for both sides in the country, and there are more than two sides now, that's very obvious, to begin to learn how to work together for the betterment of the country. Because it's very clear, if you advocate for science, that if you look at all the advances of the last 100, 150 years, when it comes to life expectancy, healthcare outcomes, economic growth, strong job market, whatever, the underpinnings have almost always come from science and technology.
Being an advocate for science has always been a bit of a no-brainer for me, but it was prevention research that really kick-started my career in public health advocacy. The best thing advocates can do is truly tell their story. What we know at the Alzheimer's Association is that every advocate, every volunteer, even our employees, all have a story of what drives them in their advocacy. And the ability to tell that story about a loved one, your own fears, how a disease is impacting your life, and why research matters is the most compelling part of advocacy.
Research America plays a critical role in advocating for science and science policy at so many different levels and in so many different sectors of our economy. At the end of the day, America's sustained leadership has always been driven by science and innovation. That's true whether it was agricultural sciences, health sciences, computer sciences, and now climate sciences. So I think Research America has an even greater role and responsibility to play in the future as we work to advocate for more science funding, more science leadership, and more science-informed policy decision-making across multiple sectors.
I think the number one science policy issue right now is trust in science and disinformation about science and medicine and public health. Research America's agenda is a bipartisan one. It is a very American one, which is to say American science, ingenuity, innovation is really what has driven our economy and created jobs. And sometimes I think we forget that and need to go back to our roots and invest in science and in the translation of science.
I was inspired to become an advocate for science due to my love of science. I love coming to lab every day, performing research, and science has made major impacts on people's lives. And I want everybody to know about these impacts and how they've affected their life in a positive way. I think advocates can be most impactful just by continually engaging with the public, and whether that's via social media, performing town halls and Q&As, podcasts, talking with reporters. I think you just need to get out there, get your voice out there, and really try to engage with the public.
We advocate for science because we are strong believers that will improve people's lives. And that's gonna get a world with better health, people happier. Science can also contribute to provide economic arguments, not just the biological, epidemiological arguments, but also economic and social arguments to make to achieve better health for everybody. So science is, if you like, the lights who give us the knowledge and the solutions. For us, advocating for science is advocating for life.
You know, medicine is ultimately a very human experience. You know, it's as much as we can reduce physiology and organ systems to, very orderly schematics. The essence of a human being ill is a very personal thing. The grand sweep of watching, the evolution of medicine in my lifetime was one of the most exciting things that has happened in my lifetime. New diseases, new cures. Without the research, without the kind of advocacy, we'd be just dealing with the same diseases in the same way for decades. And I think that's what makes this so interesting.
Thank you, and hello, everyone. I'm glad you could join us, whether it's here in the auditorium or all across America that's going to be watching this. So let's get started. We're going to have some really important awards this afternoon, and we're going to start with my friend, an incredible advocate, and this year's John Edward Porter Advocacy Award. Governor Mike Castle, who is the Chairman Emeritus of Research America's Board of Directors, is a former 2-term governor of Delaware, 9-term U.S. congressman, lieutenant governor, deputy attorney general, state senator, and state representative. Pretty good run of public service there, Mike. And partner now in the DLA Piper's Government Affairs practice. Governor Castle has worked across party lines, building bridges and forming coalitions to find pragmatic, bipartisan solutions to some of the most pressing problems facing our country. Really an extraordinary champion for research in public health, healthcare policy, critical to advancing the individual and public good. Governor Castle's many distinctions include taking bold, influential stands to support expanding stem cell research, banning assault weapons, and many other initiatives that contributed to improving the health of American people and the population globally. Now let's learn a little more about Mike.
It was a tremendous privilege to serve with Mike in the House of Representatives for his nearly 2 decades in the Congress. We also served together on Research America's board of directors. In fact, Mike and I were chair and co-chair respectively of the board before I returned to the Congress. Had I not already gained enormous respect for Mike, our board service together sealed that deal. Among Mike's many accomplishments, what stands out for me is his impact on the priority our nation assigns to research. In fact, I recall something Mike said on numerous occasions when he asserted that the United States must commit to shattering and reshattering the boundaries of medical progress. We've all benefited from his determination to ensure that our nation works harder than diseases do, and that we keep researching and applying that knowledge so that everyone, everywhere, can live a longer and healthier life. Mike, congratulations on receiving this special award, and congratulations to Research America for making such a wise choice. I know that former Chair John Edward Porter is smiling up there, knowing that you don't like the spotlight, but that you deserve it nonetheless. And so it's an honor, my friend, and a distinct privilege to celebrate you, Mike. Congratulations, best wishes forever, and thank you for all that you've done.
I first met Mike Castle when he served in the U.S. House of Representatives with me, and we became very close when we worked together on legislation to expand ethical embryonic stem cell research. Mike Castle has been one of the most fearless advocates for ethical biomedical research in this nation, and as a result of his undying quest for medical breakthroughs, his experience and his influence will be felt in future generations. I've always been inspired by Mike's willingness to buck his own party and his willingness to buck the establishment to create policy that he knows will benefit the lives of his constituents and those around him. I remember when we worked on the stem cell legislation together, he would be calmly putting together the coalitions we needed to pass the bill, while I would be excitedly running around trying to push the envelope. We were a unique team, but I think we were a good team in the end. Mike, I'd just like to say how much I enjoyed serving and working with you. I wish you all the best, and I congratulate you on this much-deserved and important award.
Yeah, I had the great pleasure and honor of serving with Mike Castle for many years in the United States House of Representatives. He was a great mentor to me. He was a leading figure in terms of trying to strike bipartisan compromises, and he was deeply dedicated to medical research issues. Bottom line is, this is a man who's accomplished a great deal in his life. He's been a strong leader. He's been a voice for the governance wing of the Republican Party, and has really made a lasting impact through his service. What inspires me about Mike Castle is the fact that he was always willing to mentor younger members of Congress. He was unusual in the sense that he had been a governor and then he came to the Congress. It usually is the other way around, and so he brought with him a wealth of experience that really benefited many of us while we served.
Mike Castle was a dear friend. When he was elected back in '92, began serving in '93. We served for almost 10 years together in the House. Mike was instrumental when we started the Tuesday Group, the group of moderates in the House that really were engaged on virtually every issue on the House floor. He was viewed by his constituents as one that was going to not vote on the political side of things, but really on the policy side. I wish we had more Mike Castles in the Congress today. He was one that listened. He was one that certainly responded to his constituents. He was thoughtful, he was well-read, he was a giant in the years that he served in the House, and really was just a terrific guy to get to know.
Mike was not able to join us this afternoon, but asked that I share how touched and grateful he is to receive this award. He drafted a statement which I'm honored to be able to share with you. And I quote, "I regret that I'm not able to be with you this afternoon, but please know that Jane and I join you in spirit. My thanks to Bart for delivering these remarks on behalf of himself, as well as Mary for her steadfast leadership and her ability to rise to every occasion, and I mean every occasion." And she's had some occasions. I'm deeply honored to be recognized for this singular honor and extend my gratitude and appreciation to Research America and Anne Lurie, whose generous support makes this award possible. There are a few people in my career I have revered more than John Porter, which makes me all the more proud to receive an award carrying his name. It was John who urged me to join him on the board of Research America. As ever, he modeled strong and clear leadership and mentored me. Joining the board was an easy yes for another reason. Since I first got to know Research America during my service in Congress, when we worked together to assure that stem cell research could continue to be supported by the federal government. I was especially happy to work across the aisle with my good friend Dinah DeGette to secure legislation protecting stem search research. I know many lives have been saved, the quality of life improved for many by assuring that there is no barriers to medical research, and my thanks to Diana for her lovely remarks. Also thanks to Fred Upton, Kwesi Mfume, Charlie Dent for their kind remarks. I'm truly privileged to count these exceptional leaders as my former colleagues and friends. The outstanding members of the Research America Board and its extraordinary staff are special to me. I value them. I value the work they do. And through smooth sailing in the roughest kind, the pandemic lockdown, they were always there. You all made it an easy lift for me to be your chair and a privilege to represent our mission and values with leaders on the Hill, our alliance members, the media, and more. Thank you again for this truly meaningful honor. I trust you all will continue the great work of Research America with pride and in the knowledge that you are serving America's interest in a rare, meaningful way. So I think we all feel Mike's presence here. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Bart, for that extraordinary tribute to Governor Castle. I have the privilege and the honor of being the chair of the board of Research America now, and you can see why I might have an inferiority complex. This place has an extraordinary group of leaders who've been chair of the board in the past. It's a group that have done substantive things, constructive things, and impactful things. And so I just want to tip my hat to Governor Castle as well. So thank you. All right, so now I have the great privilege, I have the joy actually, to engage in a conversation with our honorees, our first group of honorees. And so I'm going to welcome them to the stage. Dr. Robert W. Kahn, the Distinguished Policy Fellow, School of Global Policy and Strategy at UC San Diego, and President and CEO Emeritus of the Kavli Foundation, who is our Leadership Award winner. Norm Augustine, the retired chairman and CEO of Lockheed Martin Corporation, and the former acting secretary of the Army, who is our National Leadership Awardee. Dr. Rita Caldwell, the distinguished university professor at the University of Maryland, College Park, who is our Builders of Science Awardee. And Dr. Jason McClellan, Professor Robert A. Welch Chair in Chemistry at the Department of Molecular Biosciences at UT Austin, who is our Building the Foundation Awardee. So we have builders and leaders up here on the stage. And I gotta tell you, it is a joy to be up here with honorees, and they're all incredibly accomplished in their areas, and we're gonna talk about that. And we're coming together at this extraordinary moment. I often talk about the fact that we live in just absolutely extraordinary times when it comes to the sciences. If you think about every discipline, biomedical research in particular, but every discipline, we're living in a time when we know more than we've ever known before, and the possibilities are seemingly endless. And you see this in productivity, you see it in technological advancement, you see it in cures that we never talked about before. And yet, we live in this time when all of that is at risk. And the state of science in America today is is in a challenging place. And so I want to talk about that with this group of honorees. Just one metric of that is the fact that as a U.S. federal government, we invest much less today as a percentage of GDP than we have in the past 50 years in terms of science and technology. And we are fortunate in this country to have an amazing private sector that is also investing in research and development in science and technology. But it's one part of the equation, not every part. So we're gonna have that conversation here. And I'm really fortunate to be able to kick off that conversation with Norm Augustine. Because Norm, your seminal report, and it's got the greatest title ever, everybody remembers it, Rising Above the Gathering Storm, which really laid the groundwork for our country's ability to innovate and compete on a global scale. And you have spoken out, you've written extensively about the intersection of scientific innovation in the US economy. As you said, you've spoken in hundreds of congressional meetings, and you've had that conversation about what it means. What potential do you think investment in scientific innovation has to change our economic future, for the better or for the worse?
Well, thank you. And you mentioned that the Gathering Storm report, and in that we pointed out that really one of the most important basic elements of a quality of life for our citizenry is founded by the economy in terms of providing jobs, health care, national security, and so on. And it's very significant, I believe, that there are several studies, two of which were the basis of Nobel Prizes, that pointed out that up to 85% of the growth in America's economy over recent decades can be attributed to just two closely related fields, science and technology. And these two fields are in a golden age right now. As you've just heard, of course, it's a wonderful time in the biosciences, the medical sciences, in genomics and artificial intelligence and informatics. You go down the line. But advancements in these fields don't just grow on trees. And it takes at least two important ingredients to have advancement. One of those ingredients is people who are talented and qualified to perform research. And the other is to provide the funds that it needs to underpin research. And if you touch on those two areas, take the latter first, the funding, our government invests 0.2% of the GDP in basic research in all fields. And that, for comparison, is about what the US population spends on beer every year, which gives you some idea of the priority that the citizenry gives. It takes for granted this tree that produces these marvels. And then when it comes to people, there's cause for concern there. Take talented foreign young people who want to come here for their advanced degrees. We make it as hard as we can for them to come here, and once they get their degree, we make it very hard for them to stay here. And then when you look at what we do to train our young people, look at 15-year-olds in this country and how they do on international tests, standardized tests. And at the last test of that type, American 15-year-olds finished 18th in the world in science and 37th in math. And there's good news and there's bad news. As I see it, the good news is that there's enormous opportunity for better lives through science and through research. The bad news is that you have to invest in it, and we're not doing a very good job of that.
Thank you, Norm. You've given me a talking point I'm going to remember now. It's the same amount as we spend on beer. I'm going to remember that. That's a good talking point. Rita, in your book, A Lab of One's Own, you described what you call the odyssey of solving the anthrax letters crisis of 2001. And that effort also required intense collaboration and data sharing. And that was 23 years ago, and yet it seems like even more so with the challenges that we face today, collaboration and data sharing are going to be important. You want to expand on that and tell us about it?
Delighted to. It was a very interesting time. This is 23 years ago. Is the mic on? Yes. Okay, very good. And 9/11 occurred. And those of us in the audience, I realize now that there may be some in the audience who weren't born then, but that's okay. At that time, there was a distribution of the anthrax spores throughout Washington, and it was a frightening time. This was just at the beginning of molecular sciences, of genomics. This was a time when we barely had a couple of bacteria sequenced, very little short bacteria, small bacteria, and half the anthrax genome. And so there needed to be collaboration. It happened that I had been on the intelligence science board for the CIA as a civilian, and then became director of the National Science Foundation. And as director, I was asked to coordinate a group of individuals from the different agencies. So we got together representatives from the NIH, from the Homeland Security, from DOD, from the FBI, the CIA. It was about 17 of us, all the agencies. We could have easily had a presidential directive, but if we had done so, the FBI and the CIA would not have been able to participate because they were carrying out a criminal investigation. So we simply met every Friday afternoon for 3 years. And we collaborated. We called ourselves the Genome Sciences Coordinating Committee. We had no official capacity except that we were representatives of our agencies. But we met together, we shared resources, we worked through what was a developing scientific capability of sequencing and being able to pinpoint very precisely the sequence of this bacterium. As it turned out, with the collaboration, of course, of the FBI and the CIA, we were able to obtain some of these samples. We didn't ask where they came from. All we did was collect the samples, do the sequencing, and then one day, when one of the FBI agents asked about one of the sequences, he had a very big smile on his face, and we knew that we had nailed it. So it's an example of collaboration amongst the agencies, sharing data and applying science. And this was a nascent science. This was emerging, but we were able to demonstrate the power of genomics and the ability to be able to address a very important human problem. I'd like to add, since we are discussing the Research America advocacy, the Research America fight for science, I think it's a time now that we really need to focus on public health. And one of the areas that I've been very fortunate to be participating in is using satellite sensing for predicting pandemics, using the ability to be able to monitor environmental parameters that can allow us then to predict the potential of an outbreak of a vector-borne disease. And again, this is science applied to public health. So it's a huge power, I think, that we as scientists have, and I think science is a magnificent gift to humanity if we use it wisely and use it well. So having had that opportunity to see how sharing of data, collaboration, and how powerful that can be in solving a problem, I think it's a message we might want to bring to Congress.
We absolutely should bring it to Congress. Rita, just saying that we live in extraordinary times, the fact that we could live in a time when we could weather forecast infectious disease is extraordinary to me.
We're doing this actually at the present time for the United Nations for predicting cholera risk in Yemen and Ethiopia and in other countries in Africa. I think this is, again, a demonstration of the advances in science and how we can apply them to public health in a very, very powerful way. So I would say that satellite sensing is a public health tool.
Love it. Well, speaking of public health, Jason, your work contributing to the development of the first ever RSV vaccine, also contributing to the COVID vaccine, all required investment, innovation, collaboration, a whole bunch of other things, all the things we've just been talking about. The investment in research and development, as we've just talked about, is lower than it has been in the past. Are you concerned that younger scientists, the ones, we had a board meeting today and we were talking about early career scientists are the future, but then Kefsa Raza pointed out to us very clearly that actually they're today, those graduate students, those postdocs are actually our scientists today. Are you concerned about them being discouraged or turning away from the laboratory or from science altogether?
Absolutely. We see it all the time, that the current students are uncertain about their future and their careers. I think it's even harder maybe to get the students interested in science even earlier than that, right? The ones that we want to get to become grad students in postdocs. But salaries are generally low, although there's been a move to increase those over time. Same with increasing postdoc salaries and other benefits, although the cap on NIH modular budgets has not kept pace with inflation. And so we're sort of at some point going to hit some sort of plateau in reckoning, really. We want to pay our trainees well, or make sure they have a nice cost of living, but it's hard to just find money for that in our budgets. So we need to keep investing. Technology in particular really raises all boats. So the places that have access to the best technologies, microscopes, what have you, they can do the best science. And so we really need to continue investing and figure out ways to get more money to the science foundations, NIH, NSF, and others in order to keep funding and make our young people excited about their prospects in science.
Makes so much sense. Can you also talk just a bit about the importance of collaboration and how this community can support it, the community of advocates?
Yeah, collaboration's been critical for the type of research that we do. For vaccine development, there's many different groups specializing in different parts. We do a lot of the structural biology, determine high-resolution three-dimensional structures of the proteins, perform protein engineering. Others are involved in antibody isolation so that we can use them to characterize the antigens. Some need to actually test these in animals and preclinical studies, perform the virology, preclinical trials. So everybody really works together. One challenge, of course, is in science that there can't be something of a winner-take-all attitude, and that there's a lot of praise and prestige given to the people at the first position of an author list and at the last position. And so trying to come up with ways to mitigate that so everybody involved with the process feels properly rewarded and credited. Generally, I just think that there's enough credit to go around. We shouldn't worry so much. Try to look out for the trainees, give the best authorship positions to those whose career may benefit the most from it.
Great, I love that view. Thanks, Jason. Bob, you've also championed investing in scientific research for a long time. And in a 2021 article describing how philanthropy is America's unique research advantage, you discussed the evolution of American wealth creation and philanthropy. And then here in this auditorium, during the celebration of the 75th anniversary of Vannevar Bush's call to action, you also talked about how philanthropy is a part of that ecosystem. And I want to just ask you, in this era that you've called the next Gilded Age, how do you see philanthropy impacting the future of science and technology and our ability to compete globally?
Well, I think the answer is simple, tremendously. And if you go back to the first Gilded Age and ask yourself, why does the United States have the greatest set of universities on the planet? And remember that basic research particularly is carried out mainly by people at universities and nonprofit research organizations like the Salk Institute, Cold Spring Harbor, and so on. We have the greatest set of private universities because of the investments in founding those universities in the first Gilded Age. Johns Hopkins in 1871, Vanderbilt in 1873, Stanford in 1885, Chicago and Rockefeller in 1890, and on it goes, Carnegie and Mellon, now Carnegie Mellon. All the way to the 1930s, the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton. So we have this collection because we have endowed private universities and we have great publics. And the combination is unbeatable. So now we find ourselves, fast forward. By the way, philanthropy was the primary supporter of science pre-World War II. And Rockefeller was very big, Rockefeller Foundation. So Shah is one of the recipients. Make that connection. But today, and since about 1980, and for reasons I really can't go into, we are in a second Gilded Age today. Enormous fortunes are being made. And the question is, what's going to happen with wealth? Historically, the United States has had a culture of giving back. If you think of the arc from the first Gilded Age and Carnegie's admonition, if you die with your wealth, you die poor. To 111 years later, and the Gates-Buffett pledge in 2010, at least give half of it back. And it's being given back. So I'd like to give you just a stunning statistic. Before I do, just ask yourself, how much from philanthropy per year do you think is going into the support of science, technology, mathematics? Have a number in your mind. Now I'll tell you the answer. We just finished looking carefully at this after the 2021 paper, three of my colleagues and I at UC San Diego. It turns out, if you combine current philanthropic giving, which is about $7.3 billion, to science, engineering, mathematics, technology, $5.3 billion that comes from the payout from the endowments at all of our great universities, which they themselves spend on themselves in support of science. And you add the money that goes to the nonprofit research organization, about $9.3 billion. Rita, you'll love this. NSF's budget for science is about $55 billion a year. Those numbers I just quoted you add up to $22 billion. So philanthropy supercharges the American research system. It's 40% of what the federal government spends, and it spends it differently. It spends it with more flexibility. It can give the money out faster, and it can partner with government when that's appropriate. And I don't know whether you want me to say it now or later. Can I give the example of the BRAIN Initiative, since this is a medical group?
Go ahead. It's a medical room. Talk about the brain.
All right. So the first great grand challenge problem of the 21st century in science was proposed by President Obama in 2013, and it was called the BRAIN Initiative. That BRAIN Initiative is now 10 years in, and it added $500 million annually to the budget for science in the country. Most of it going through NIH, but a lot of it going through NSF and other agencies. Where did the BRAIN Initiative come from? It started with a meeting of three foundations asking the following question: what are the opportunities at the intersection of neuroscience and nanoscience? And we supported that. The Kavli Foundation, you're sitting in the Kavli auditorium. The Kavli Foundation supported it, Paul Allen's foundation supported it, and the Gatsby Foundation in the UK. Long story short, from that meeting came the idea that we might be able in the next 10 to 20 years map the functioning brain, not the neurons statically, but functioning. The government got interested. Philanthropy said we'd support it. NIH picked it up. NSF picked it up. 18 months later, we were in the East Room of the White House, and the president announced the BRAIN Initiative. It started with philanthropy. And it doesn't always take big money. What it takes is money spent differently. So I think philanthropy will be playing a critical role, and particularly if it cannot replace government, But to the degree that the government doesn't expand the funding in the way that it should, there'll be a certain amount of backfill that will come from recycling of the wealth of the current age we're living in.
For that. Backfilling is one thing. I'd rather it catalyze growth elsewhere. And so let me just turn it to a little bit about the global competition that we're in. Just this week, the appropriations committees in the House and the Senate have started passing appropriations bills, and the budget for the National Science Foundation was unfortunately cut by a large percentage, almost 9% is my understanding. The same day, China announced they were growing their research budget by 10%. And we live in this world where the benefits of that discovery, of that development, accrue to the countries that do the research and that do the work. And we've been leading for 75 years. Will that benefit continue to accrue to us? Can we at the same time say we're in a global competition, we want to be attractive, we want to be a crossroads for science, we want to bring in great students and great postdocs from this country and from elsewhere, and we want to solve and cure disease, and we want to grow the economy. Can we say that at the same time that we're creating budgets that we are today? Rita?
You've given me the opportunity to, and Bob emphasizes it, to state that the National Science Foundation is totally underfunded. It's something in the order of $9 billion, where NIH is in the 30, 40 billion. The NSF really ought to be tripled. I know that there is support for that. During the time I was director, we were able to increase the budget about 67, almost 70%. So the activity can be directed. And I think it's really critical that we make that kind of fundamental investment. And I think it's not so much direct competition, but being able to collaborate as well, I think internationally. And to the point that has been made by my fellow panelists, to make it so difficult for the very bright foreign students who come to the US and want to stay, and make it very, very hard for them now to even come, never mind trying to stay as scientists here. So this is something we have to change. But I'll say it again, the NSF budget is severely underfunded.
I agree, and so is the NIH budget, in my opinion. Jason, I'm going to turn to you because you've talked about this in terms of collaboration, not competition. Speak more about that.
I think the U.S. is so fortunate that many of the brightest minds in the world want to come here for their studies at the undergraduate, graduate, postdoctoral level, and it really causes brain drain in these other countries. Like their best people are coming here and often staying and being successful in leading many of these discoveries. And I think with the decreasing budgets, the cuts, also the hostility of some administrations towards foreign students can really start to turn it around where maybe Europe's looking more attractive, or even the countries in Asia and others. So I think we have to be really careful about that and realize how much the U.S. has benefited over the decades with so many people wanting to come to our U.S. universities for training.
Norm, your report was The Gathering Storm, and it was over a decade ago. Where are we? Are we in the storm?
I would say so. About 5 years after the original Gathering Storm report, we put out an update, and the conclusion was that during those 5 years, overall, we had lost ground. And as you just pointed out, as we sit here, we just cut the NSF budget by 5%, while China announced they're increasing their science budget by 10%. And we sometimes forget China is something to really think about. We don't often realize that their gross domestic product, that purchasing power parity, passed ours 10 years ago and is still going up. Not yet an economic parity, fortunately. But people tend to take science for granted. And you take your cell phone out, and they'll say, that's great engineering. Well, I'm an engineer. And there's nothing I've ever done in my career that wasn't made possible by a scientist 10 or 20 years before. And one of the things I found when I try to promote science is one thing, I apologize for saying it in this crowd, is that scientists don't do a very good job of portraying the impact they have on the world. Another thing is that, particularly in the biomedical sciences, somebody that is really credible is somebody who's alive today because of a breakthrough in science. And if they would get out and tell their story, and some do, but more need to. And I think the other thing that tends to be fairly compelling in trying to tell a story that the Gathering Storm did when it put its warning out was that people who are not directly beneficiaries, and I say directly here because we all are, but directly beneficiaries of scientific research spending, they are very credible. And that's one of the things that's helped me is that I'm not a bioscientist, I'm not a scientist, I'm an engineer. I am a rocket scientist, whatever that's worth. But those are the groups that need to get out and tell a story. And the fact that we don't get much support in the budget, there's some people here from Congress who've done so much for us. But overall, take health care. We spend 18% of the GDP dealing with people who aren't healthy, most of it, and 0.1% or so of basic research to deal with those problems. That doesn't make any sense.
Norm, we're in our last 4 minutes, and so I'm going to turn quickly to a question to say, what should we do about it? And so, of course, that's a quick answer. Bob, you're already doing something about it. You've gathered together a salon group. Tell us maybe just a quick bit about that.
Hello? It's working. First, let me answer the question you put before. If we continue the trend we're in, the answer is no. We will not retain the leadership we have had. Don't fool yourself. Okay? This is the first time we passed the CHIPS and Science Act. We funded the CHIPS. We didn't fund the science. And now we're underfunding the science, not just at NIH, at NSF, but elsewhere in the government. So you can survive anything for a year or 2 or 3. You cannot survive it for 5 or 10. And so if over the next decade, the trends that we see at the federal level continue, you won't see leadership of the United States in 20 years. Nothing turns right away, but the precursors are what you have to look out for. So what can we do a little bit about that? In 2012, 13, 14, a group of us founded something called the Science Philanthropy Alliance. And these were a group of foundations. There were originally just 5 of us. And we had in our endowments, about $30 billion. So it made a big difference. But we advocate for philanthropy to support science and for philanthropists to support science. So the group was really put together to talk to the new wealth being created in the United States and to explain how important basic science particularly is to the underpinnings of everything. Norm has put it very well. Today, that group has 35 members, and their endowments have about $140 billion. So it's a major mover, and it doesn't want money for itself. Those people have their own money. They made a big impact on the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. They wanted to support, I hope this isn't offensive in this group, they wanted to support a disease. It's natural. Everybody's got somebody who had some health issue in their family. We advocated that they support basic science that will underpin the solutions in the future. And they list carefully, and remarkably, that's what they're doing. And they put $3 billion towards that effort. So that sort of thing, repeated time and again, if we can make a difference.
Norm, and then we'll go to Jason, and we'll end on Rita. Go ahead, Norm.
Just wanted to build on the point that we need to tell the story a whole lot better. Investing in astronomy, for example, has led to adaptive optics, which has been adopted for ophthalmological applications for human health. The kinds of laser surgery traces back to a physicist working in a laboratory studying laser beams, and a graduate student accidentally his eye in the beam, gets rushed to the hospital, and the physician is more interested in the fact that it's a perfect round hole rather than the other problem. Hence, laser surgery. But my point is, we need to tell our story much, much better.
That's right. And let's not repeat that in a different way. Yeah. Thank you. Norm, what should we do to ensure that we do stay competitive? What should we as advocates do?
Questions to me?
To you, yes.
The first thing we've got to do is make the case to the average person that the quality of their life depends heavily on investing in basic research. It's true, and so it shouldn't be all that hard, and it just takes a lot of legwork. And more of us have to get out and do that legwork. And if we don't do that, as my good friend on my right says, we're going to regret it. And the question that's often asked is, how could America be the leader in science and technology today when we weren't doing many of these things in the past? And one of the answers is that much of the talent in our science enterprise was born abroad and came here. And frankly, if it weren't for those people who came here, the science enterprise and the engineering enterprise in this country wouldn't function today. And so we've got to take a careful look at what we're doing with our immigration laws, our green cards, and so on.
Jason, I'm going to give you the last word. So public health, making sure that we don't get RSV, that we don't get COVID, that we don't get all the things that your vaccines protect us from. How do we make the case?
I think, as I said in my video, a lot of it is just getting out there and advocating for science. Scientists generally don't want to be holding a microphone on a stage. We'd rather be in a lab. It's just not something we're comfortable with. So, but just
well.
I have some media training, but having more media training for scientists, letting them get out there, engage with the public. I've done a lot of Zoom town halls, Q&As, things like that. So it's important to them. Our constituents need to know that many of these advances are going to perhaps save their lives or the lives of a loved one later. And we just need to do a better job of relaying scientific breakthroughs to the general public.
Thank you. Well, as I said at the outset, these are builders and leaders of science up on the stage, and you show it with everything you say. So thank you very much, and on to the next.
I have to say that that was really an inspiring group. I mean, they appropriately put out a real warning and call to action for us that we really need to attend to. They really made the point of the urgency, and I think that's really crucial. And Norm, science is a data-driven enterprise, and so thank you for the data point about beer and investment in science. It reminds me of a group that one of the several bad groups that I fell into when I was in college. That late at night we would look at each other and say, "We can always find enough spare change for another beer." And maybe that's the message we need to carry to Congress as well. There are two additional honorees who could not be with us today. The Edwin C. Whitehead Award for Medical Research Advocacy recognizes exemplary leaders, particularly those in public office, who have shown a longstanding commitment to advancing health research as a national priority. The 2024 honorees, as we heard at the beginning of this meeting, are Senator Patty Murray from Washington and Senator Bill Cassidy from Louisiana. Senator Murray has worked for 30 years, as we heard, in the Senate, and she's chaired 4 very important committees from which she has really pressed her focus on women veterans, and children's health, COVID relief, and public health preparedness, and advocated for more funding for the NIH, for the NSF, the CDC, and ARPA-H. Senator Cassidy is a physician who practiced for 20 years before he moved into politics. He understands the crucial link between basic research and innovations that improve and extend lives, as we heard. And he's sponsored many bills that leverage research and public health, and he was influential in the confirmation of Dr. Monica Beccagnoli as director of NIH. So we have brief video remarks. Unfortunately, they can't be with us today, but from both senators to share with you now.
Hi, everyone. This is Senator Patty Murray. I want to offer my sincerest gratitude to everyone at Research America for offering me the Edwin C. Whitehead Award for Medical Research Advocacy. This is a huge honor, and I'm humbled to be sharing the stage with all the other advocates and researchers, scientists who are receiving awards today. The work you do and the investments we make as a country into biomedical research are literally life-saving. You are on the front line of national challenges like fighting substance use disorders, tackling the maternal health crisis, or improving COVID-19 treatments. But your work isn't just some concept or line item on a budget for patients holding out for a new treatment or cure, those fighting cancer, Alzheimer's, and other dreaded disease. Your work is extremely personal. Your work can lead to breakthroughs that give people more time with loved ones and new hope for the future. As chair of the Senate Appropriations Committee and a former chair of the Senate Health Committee, I understand how our investments in research matter, and that's why I've worked for years to increase funding for the NIH, CDC, and NSF, and why I'm going to keep pushing to secure the resources and support you all need to save and improve lives. Last Congress, I was proud to have negotiated and passed legislation to create and fund ARPA-H to turbocharge cutting-edge medical research. Together, we can ensure our country remains at the forefront of medical innovation and research. So thank you again for this award and for all the work that Research America does.
This is medical doctor and Senator Bill Cassidy thanking you for the award that you have bestowed upon me today. As a doctor, as a senator, I know that improving medical research is critical to creating new treatments that save lives. I like to tell people when I was in medical residency back in the 80s, one of the most common surgeries was removing a portion of a patient's stomach to address peptic ulcer disease. And then along comes cimetidine, Tagamet, and boom, no one did the surgery anymore. And now that same pill is sold over the counter. This is innovation created by research, improving patient outcomes, lowering patient costs, and did I say now the pill is sold over the counter. This is the power of medical research. So as the lead Republican on the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pension Committee, I am working to make sure that there is money to fund research and that patients have access to the fruits of this research as we preserve our ability to develop these new treatments and cures. I am honored to receive the Edwin C. Whitehead Award. I look forward to working together to improve the research environment so that there'll be another story 20 years, 30 years from now as someone relates that some common condition that we have today in her residency is no longer seen now that she is a senator. Thank you.
So thank you, Senator Murray, Senator Cassidy, for championing science and supporting medical and research progress. We look forward to personally delivering the awards to you soon. And now I have the honor of introducing our second panel. Joining us are Dr. Celine Gounder, Senior Fellow and Editor-at-Large for Public Health, KFF Health News, Dr. Rajiv J. Shah, President of the Rockefeller Foundation, from the Alzheimer's Association, Dr. Joanne Pike, President and CEO, and patient advocate Lori Weiss, representing Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, Marie-Ange Sirocco-Yao, Chief Research Mobilization and Growth Officer. And leading the panel discussion is Karen Goraleski, CEO Emeritus of the American Society of Tropical Medicine and Hygiene.
I'm really pleased to lead a discussion about the intersections of U.S. and global health interests. And so much of the things that we be thinking about were touched on in the previous panel. And I'll say at the outset, there is no separation from U.S. health and global health. It's all global health. Everybody's in this global health space. So I'm going to start with a couple of more comments. We just marked the 4-year anniversary of the COVID pandemic. On one hand, it feels to me like it just started, and then on the other hand, it feels like it's just so far away. At the time that was bubbling up and working with tropical medicine, emerging infectious disease researchers, I had an early heads up that this was not a normal virus showing up. And I thought, this is the moment that we're going to have a deeper understanding of the intersection between US and global health. I thought, this is it. Well, really didn't turn out that way, did it? So some have come to understand that, and others have not. And Johnson & Johnson's support of this portfolio of public health awards acknowledges this global health interconnectedness of all of us. And I think shows that even more work needs to be done so that everyone understands this and, like touched on the previous panel said, sees the value in it for them, right? This all comes down to the individual seeing, oh, I get it. I understand why this matters. So enough from me. I'm going to go to our panelists and awardees, and I'm going to start with you, Celine. You're one of the leading experts in science, medicine, and public health communication. I see you regularly on CBS mornings. I feel like I know you. When I saw you, I'm like, yes. You're clear, you're uncomplicated, and as a result, you build trust when you talk about the topics that you cover. As a physician with infectious disease expertise, you've worked extensively in the US and in Africa and elsewhere. You've seen the intersections of US interests and US research and global health research. You've also seen where it's not really been a very good intersection. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on how our current climate of mistrust, lack of communication, and the inability for people to just kind of speak civilly to one another, is resonating globally. And how do we move forward from here? So a two-part question.
I think it's important to recognize that U.S. is actually one of the leading exporters of mis and disinformation on science and medicine.
Okay, we have to hold it right there.
I do think it's important to recognize that. And, people like Heidi Larson and so on have done extensive work on this. Now, it is not a unidirectional movement of disinformation. This is certainly broader than that, and it's multi-directional. Just in the past week, we had the largest cyber attack on our healthcare system ever in terms of the impact. And this is having a huge impact on physicians being able to bill, in terms of patients being able to fill their prescriptions. And so this is really not just a healthcare system attack. This is really so disruptive, we should be considering this a national security attack. Now, we don't know the details about this particular cyber attack, but with respect to others that have disrupted the NHS, Merck, other really critical pieces of the biomedical complex, both here and abroad, many of these attacks have been out of countries with the thieves and hackers based out of countries like Russia and China. So again, I think we need to be thinking more broadly about when we think about global, what we mean by that, and also that this is not just about science and science communication. I think about really an information supply chain, which is a little bit different by industry. So you have science, you have journalism, you have finance, you have national security, but they're all sort of generically similar in that you have raw data that somehow gets processed, contextualized, analyzed, storified, and that gets disseminated and distributed. And we very often have this very siloed way of thinking about it. It's science and medicine, and it's at the very tail end about how is this disinformation that's being put out there. we need to be thinking about the entire supply chain, and we need to be thinking about this across industries, because if you look at the business model, and this is a business model of how do you attack the information supply chain, the actors who are profiting and or funding these attacks are very much the same across the industry and at different points in the supply chain. And so I think what my advice to those of us in the room would be is stop thinking about this in this siloed, oh, it's about disinformation, it's about, not trusting vaccines. It's a much bigger thing than that. And I think, sort of to close on this, is there's a reason that we've seen a decline in trust first in government, in the media, later in science and healthcare, but this is all one big trend, and this is a continuum. These are not happening in isolation.
Thanks for that upbeat. Okay. All right. Good. Raj, increased collaboration across the R&D ecosystem is often referenced as one way to address health equity. And I know from knowing you, and I'll just give a plug, Ace to meet you, were one of our keynote speaker when you were at USAID as the administrator, and you talked about the Ebola then. So you have, and prior to that, at the Gates Foundation, you've got a long look and a long immersion in health inequity. And this amazing book that you just wrote, which I have to say that I didn't know until I was talking with Research America folks, Big Bets, How Large Scale Really Happens. You address the dramatic increase in equality everywhere. And you're still smiling and you're still upbeat. And Celine, you could listen to some of this upbeat stuff, please. So one example you reference is the global health inequity today and what we must do to reverse it. So if you could kind of wrap that into, some of those snippets from your book are really, really, really helpful. And, I want to try to remember those. And I think everybody else could too.
I remain optimistic. At the end of the day, and I wrote about this in my book, but when I was in the Obama administration, we lost the Congress, and there was a partisan fight about the budget, and it was designed to shut down USAID and a number of core USAID programs. I went up to defend our budget and said some things that were aggressive and probably wrong. They were accurate technically, but they were disrespectful in the way I said it. And I learned through the months after that on both sides of the American political spectrum, there is an extraordinary capacity to invest in science and research for the purpose of addressing inequity and suffering. That's true if you're fighting famines. That's true if you're fighting food insecurity due to climate and drought. That's true if you're fighting HIV and malaria. And I think that can be true as we fight the inequities that we're going to face in the years ahead. So I actually remain quite optimistic that these types of efforts can be really successful. I just think they have to be grounded in science and research to be effective.
Just really quickly, a very recent data point. If you go back a couple State of the Unions ago, former President Trump announced the plan to eliminate HIV in the United States by 2030. So this is very recent history. Peter, you might correct me, I think it was about 2018 or so that this announcement was made. So this is still possible.
Right, good. And I think that we all need to hear more of that, right? We do get a little bit too much on the negative side. So Marie Ange, with the amazing powerhouse of Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, has done phenomenal, life-changing work. I don't think my family knows this or my neighbors knows this, but people in this room certainly do know this. Gavi works day in and day out on addressing global health inequality. Information sharing is essential to your work as it is to everybody in this room. And that leverages partners such as WHO, such as UNICEF, World Bank, and others to translate vaccine progress into global access. Vaccine progress into global access, right? We can have all the progress we want, but if people can't get it, we've failed. Can you speak to the importance of the collaborations that transcend borders, that transcend countries, however you want to define borders, in solving the biggest public health challenges that you and Gavi take on?
Yes. Is it on?
Yes.
Okay, good. No, I think really collaboration has really been at the heart of our wins at Gavi. Since 2000, the number of child deaths has nearly halved. And this is a big part due to the power of science, vaccines, and partnerships with the US government, with research organizations, with indeed health organizations, global health organizations, but also the private sector with partners, philanthropy like the Rockefeller Foundation. And so in terms of upbeat, really, I think what's great is to see what's possible when indeed we all come together, because, we have actually vaccinated more than 1 billion children around the world and saved 17 million lives. So I think that that's quite important, and it's all to the power of science and indeed making that science available elsewhere. So I think to the first panelist, it was very interesting, the first panel about the debate on science, but I think a big part of our work is making it available as quickly as possible, because then it brings new opportunities, of course. So to your question, indeed, I mean, Gavi as a global powerhouse of vaccines, not only brings solutions to help vaccinate millions of children, but it also brings a whole systematic system of primary health care, of being, a part of for the US of global health security. That is important, because that primary health care is what is available when something happens. For all the things that we have said during the pandemic, most countries, even the lowest income one, were able to vaccinate 3 times more. And it's because of the investment that have been made possible through that collaboration. And also looking to the future, indeed, starting of thinking, protecting people's health against climate change with vaccines. We have a portfolio of vaccines that actually protect already against climate-sensitive diseases. So there's this whole chain that collaboration allows, that is quite important. In terms of the information sharing, I mean, this is really critical. I mean, a practical example is, partnering with the private sector and philanthropy. We partnered with Rockefeller to actually empower health workers, in the remote places, with digital tools, with AI, to be able to predict the surveillance. I mean, there's nothing more important in infectious disease about being able to identify what's happening, monitor, come back, and doing it, seamlessly. And that has been possible through this type of collaboration and extending it to the remote places. Most importantly, I think when we think about collaboration, is really thinking how important collaboration is in addressing that inequality that we talked about. It's really the key part of, bringing science, innovation to the rest through collaboration, because in a sense, it's having this end-to-end. We each have our specialty, but it's really drawing the best to bring it actually to where it is needed the most. So talking about, being upbeat, in 5 years or more or less will be in 2030, and it's the end of the SDGs. So we do have the opportunity, talking about a key moment of, redoubling effort and accelerating these efforts. For us, Gavi, of course, this year is a replenishment year, and that's be part of one of the efforts that we want to do in actually bringing new science. We have new vaccines that are coming up, like malaria, that, has been the biggest killer of disease. And I understand now malaria with climate change is arriving also here. And so all these efforts will be important, but there's already some tools, how we make them available faster, better, that will be critical. So I think collaboration is also through that systemic thread.
Well, you certainly take on some very challenging work. And that brings me to talk about the Alzheimer's Association. So Joanne Pike and Lori Weiss here. Joanne, the Alzheimer's Association invests significantly in Alzheimer's and dementia research, and that funding to accelerate global health research. I've certainly thought about and gone to the Alzheimer's site myself, looking for information as we face this in our own family. And it wasn't always apparent to me that I was also like, okay, this is global. It's not just US. But I was very focused because it was me. So it's me thinking about US on this side. So because of the work that you've done and you're modeling this type of advocacy, you're this model of global collaboration and advocacy. So can you speak to how the organization's advocacy is in support of global health research is making a difference? And where do you see that progress?
Yeah, and I want to just quickly start with just a big thank you to Research America and the support from the steadfast commitment from the Rogers family for even us being here on this stage. It has been an incredible year for the movement that we certainly support in our cause, for the people who are impacted it both here in the US and across the globe. We are at a pivotal moment. But this pivotal moment would not have come if it was not for the thankless and tireless work that our advocates do, that our staff here in DC does, that our grassroots advocates in communities nationwide have really been able to do in this last year to bring us to this moment, but for the last decade as well. An example of that is back in 2011 when we passed the National Alzheimer's Project Act. We were funding about $400 million in Alzheimer's and dementia-related research. Today, due to a lot of support across the board and through our advocacy efforts, we're at $3.7 billion from the federal government right now. Huge strides, that's a 7-fold increase. But it's not just about us asking Congress to fund research. It's about our commitment, our advocates' commitment to funding research as well. And this year alone, we made our largest single-year investment in global research at $100 million. That $100 million breaks down to 1,100 projects in 56 countries on all continents except Antarctica. We haven't figured that one out yet. But it is with the knowledge that progress, hope, cure, improved biomarkers, improved diagnostics can come from anywhere. It does not have to come from the US alone. But funding best-in-class research gets us further, faster across the globe. And it's with that knowledge in mind that we know that no matter who we are, we have to convene. We have to bring all of our advocates, our people, our communities along with us to benefit families like yours, Karen, like mine, like many of you maybe in this audience, to change the trajectory of this disease. And there's so many more reasons today to be hopeful for where we are. We have 2 FDA-approved treatments, with a 3rd one potentially on the way. We have more knowledge about biomarkers because of the global research community than we have ever known. And biomarkers are important for diagnosing Alzheimer's, but it's also important to rule out Alzheimer's so we can make progress on all of the other dementias or brain health areas that we need to be able to navigate together. But we can't do that. And we always think it is so critically important to tell the story of our patient advocates as well. And that's why I was so happy that Lori was willing to be here with me today to really be able to tell the story of why research matters, why participation in research will change the trajectory of this disease. So Lori, can you tell us what gives you hope in participating in clinical trials?
Hi, I'm Lori Weiss. And I got a call from a friend one day, and she said, there's a drug trial coming up for Alzheimer's. Let's go. So we were like, we went in and we got our PET scans, and voila, I was in the drug trial for donanemab. And this was about, January of 22. And I participated in the monthly treatments until the end of March. And I had decided to do this because there was so much Alzheimer's disease in my family, in my husband's family. I have friends with the disease. And I didn't want my children living with the possibility of one or more of their parents dying from this disease. So we went to get the PET scans, and went through the screening, and they said, we have good news for you. You're in the safety trial. I'm like, what does that mean? And they said, that means you are getting the drug because we're testing it to make sure that it's safe. I was like, yay. So I was involved in the drug, and I finished my last dose in March of 23. My husband and all my friends can tell you that my memory is like pretty good, pretty darn good. It's getting a little bit worse, but we'll see what happens next. The results of this drug are showing that participants at the earliest stage of the disease showed 60% slowing compared to placebo. Eli Lilly submitted the application recently, and it is going through the FDA approval process right now, so hopefully it will be available to other friends of mine. And I just want to say that I got involved with the Alzheimer's Association as part of this. I saw something about an early stage advisory group. I'm like, what's that? I'm gonna go find out. I gotta do something, not working, so I gotta do something. So I decided to join the team, and I've learned so much through the process of going out and being an advocate and being able to tell people, there's hope. There's hope out there, and there's help.
I am so grateful that you made the trip today. This is super important for us to keep front of mind that all of the work that we support, that we lobby for, that we advocate for, that we dedicate our days and our sleepless nights to is really about people. And it's about you, because you are me. You're Celine. You're all these. You're my mother. You're my aunt. You know what I mean? It's all about bringing it back to individuals and to patients. We might not be a patient now, but we're all going to be a patient at some time, whatever the disease or condition is. So thank you for coming today. You've been really spectacular. You've added a spectacular piece of real relevance for us. So thanks for doing this. Thanks for coming to the Alzheimer's Association. So I see these little lights are already kind of showing up here, so we're getting to the point of wrapping up. It's been, I'm going to, first of all, I'm going to give each of you a little quick moment to say a couple of final words. So Celine, I'll start with you.
Well, it's funny that
here I sound very doom and gloom because I'm actually very often accused of being overly optimistic. But I think it's important to actually acknowledge the scale of some of the problems we're taking on. And my optimism is that we can actually do something about them. I was very fortunate to have had Bill Foege, the former CDC director, as one of my mentors. And one of the things he has told me is surround yourself by optimists. As soon as you start to say it can't be done, you've already lost the battle. And so I, every morning, remind myself of that lesson.
You know, when people say it's a tough time politically to get things done, I like to remember that President Lincoln signed the Morrill Act to create the American land-grant university system and invest in a science-based agricultural economy in the midst of the Civil War. And the truth is that over 50, 60 years drove the American economy and our competitiveness. And whether it's medicine, energy, all kinds of areas of scientific application, it's always been science, research, and innovation that has created American strength in the global economy and frankly created the capacity for America to project our values around the world in a way that save millions of lives from HIV/AIDS and other catastrophic diseases. So I remain super optimistic that even in what I suspect will be a crazy election year, we can get some big things done.
Any final thoughts from you?
I think one of the last things that I want to say is that Alzheimer's has been a part of my life for 50 years. I took care of my grandfather when I was 14, and I never thought I would see the day. And that's because all of you guys are out there doing all that research and doing the good stuff, and keep going for it.
Marie-Ange?
So I couldn't agree more. I think really, even in tough times, actually, I do think there's one thing that didn't fail us is science. I think we have to say it even in the tough times of the pandemic. I mean, science responded. So I think all the things that are being done here are extremely important. They really have the potential to change the world. And actually, I think coming back to the point of collaboration, indeed, we may see different collaboration, the US and the rest of the world, but actually there's also the collaboration, local and regional, that can be done directly also, that is quite important. So in a sense, there's new type of partnerships to be done. We see it, you know, I mean, with a lot of you here, we are working, for example, one of the things that we saw was how indeed during the pandemic, you alluded to it, Karen, you know, part of the world didn't get access to the vaccine. So we are working with the US government and others, you know, to have an African initiative, $1 billion to actually encourage regional manufacturing, and that's moving forward. So these are new type of things, you know, thinking differently about the partnership that we want to do. But definitely continue on the science, because I think that's the most promising thing that we can bring to the rest of the world. Thank you.
The last thing I might add is we are at an incredible point within the Alzheimer's space, as you've heard from Lori, as you heard me say in numbers. But one word that we used to say was only potential, but now we say in regular conversation, is that there's hope. And hope has been delivered because of the science, because of the continued investment within growing that research dollar that's being invested, whether privately or publicly. It's creating more shots on goal. And whether it's our shots on goal or whether it's a goal that you have, I can only hope that we all have that opportunity. So thank you.
So my just last couple of comments on what it is that we've heard. We heard hope, right? And As the late Paul Rogers said, research is hope. I was very fortunate to be able to work with him when I was at Research America. We heard inspiration, we heard tenacity, we heard thinking big, we heard curiosity, we heard investments. We also heard communication, 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 and partnerships, 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 which means US and non-US working together. And that's sharing data, speaking each other's language, coming up with solutions, partnerships between and across disciplines. This is the other important piece. The global partnerships across and between nonprofits, between academia, between foundations, global and US governments, ministries of health, all involving the end user at the end of the day. And that end user, like I said, is us. I've heard this phrase that I'm going to say attributed to the disability community. Nothing about us without us. We are all in this together. We have to be. So, thank you all. Really appreciate the conversation.
A special thanks to the board members, leadership, and staff of Research America, and what a great set of panel discussions today. Maybe another round of applause. Johnson & Johnson is privileged to be a sponsor of today's Advocacy Awards program and to support the outstanding achievement in public health awards. J&J endowed these awards in perpetuity in recognition of the work led by Dr. Paul Stoffels, who as J&J's former chief scientific officer championed the importance of global public health. Each year, J&J donates millions of doses of mebendazole or Vermox to deworm children in low and middle income countries. We make bedaquiline or Soturo accessible around the globe to treat multi-drug resistant tuberculosis. For developing countries, we developed a single-dose COVID vaccine that did not require minus 70-degree storage and provided it at cost to African nations for a convenient form of protection. And finally, we were one of the first to create a safe and effective Ebola vaccine. Johnson & Johnson is proud to support institutions that are dedicated to advancing health for everyone. As a recent Research America board member, I witnessed firsthand the commitment to advocating the funding of science and technology, the bedrock on which we build better health for everyone. Mary and Research America, your passion inspires all of us. Abraham Lincoln, the president who established the National Academy of Science, and the only president to hold a patent, remarked that, and I quote, "Man is not the only animal who labors, but is the only one who improves his workmanship." Today's honorees demonstrate man's capabilities to improve our workmanship in the field of human health. Congratulations to the 2024 honorees.